Chapter 796, The Hypocrites. Zhang Yi spent 2 hours on this island in Nantou country, clearing out all the bandits he found. Other than these people, he also found some women who had been kidnapped up. Just like those women in the cabin, they were all bound by chains and used as playthings for the bandit gang. As for the ships that were looted to and from, the men had all been killed as food. In the spirit of humanitarianism, Zhang Yi burned all the corpses he found, which was a way to let them rest in peace. But what to do with those women, Zhang Yi couldn't do more than leave a little bit of food. According to their current state of mind, even if they were to let go of them, I'm afraid it would be difficult to survive. However, it was not excluded that there were a few with a strong heart. By this time, Zhu Lark had already gone ashore. She made a report to Zhu Jing about the incident. The opinion given by Zhu Jing was that all matters during the voyage would be done by Zhang Yi. As long as there wasn't a conflict with a major power, Zhu Lark shouldn't intervene. However, when it came to dealing with the kidnapped women, Zhu Lark was adamant in giving her opinion. We can't leave them here, or what awaits them is still death. Zhu Lark looked at Zhang Yi with firm eyes. We can take them to the ship and bring them back to the Jiangnan region. You have plenty of supplies in hand anyway, so it doesn't matter if you bring a few more people with you. Zhang Yi's eyes widened as he stared at Zhu Lark with an incredulous expression. He had thought that the so-called Holy Mothers only existed in the internet, but he hadn't realized that Blizzard City's Missy was a Holy Mother as well. Do you realize how troublesome it is for us to bring these women along? Zhang Yi asked back with a frown. Do you know what their status was? If we let them on board, what if our mission is leaked? Zhu Lark, however, told him with a serious face, no matter what the situation is, human life was the most important thing. I can't tolerate myself giving up so many lives, they were all living beings. She stepped forward and stared at Zhang Yi. You should know that if you give up on them, they will all die. Zhang Yi recognized a fact from among her eyes. This woman was coming for real. It suddenly occurred to him that Zhu Lark had been studying abroad all this time, so her brain was all about that Western stuff. Zhang Yi admitted that if he was one of those kidnapped people, he would love to meet a woman like Zhu Lark. It was a pity that he was not. And he wasn't a kind person either, he was just an ordinary, selfish ordinary person. Facing Zhu Lark's questioning, Zhang Yi sneered in his heart. He slowly opened his mouth and asked rhetorically, Ms. Zhu is right, your nobility makes me admire you. However, I would like to ask, when the end times came, where did the 15 million population of Jinling City go now? Why there are less than 2 million people left, and a large number of old people who are unable to work have been driven out and left to fend for themselves. Zhang Yi's eyes were filled with teasing inside. At that time, where were you, kind Miss Zhu? Zhang Yi's words filled Zhu Lark with dislike. In Blizzard City, where was she to speak? But that was because of special reasons. Blizzard City didn't have the conditions to feed so many people. It's different now, the supplies you have on hand are enough for them to live. Zhang Yi asked back, on what grounds? I was having a lot of supplies, but if I really want to share them, I would share them with my compatriots. Instead of giving it to a bunch of foreigners that I don't know. Ms. Zhu, put away your cheap sympathy. This was the end times. Zhang Yi sighed in his heart as he looked at the group of women wrapped in dirty blankets. He took out enough food for them to eat for a week from the foreign space, then turned around and left. Zhu Lark looked at the group of women scrambling for food and looked helplessly at Zhang Yi. Without Zhang Yi's nod, she couldn't save these people, the sailors wouldn't listen to her. She exasperatedly shouted at Zhang Yi, but what's the point of you doing this? Giving them some food and getting that pitiful psychological comfort? You know full well that they will die, you know. You're just fooling yourself. Zhang Yi sniffed and suddenly laughed out loud. You're right, I only left food for them just to make my conscience feel better. In reality, I don't care about them at all because I'm not that fraternal to take care of everyone. Hypocritical, hypocritical. Zhang Yi didn't care about Zhu Lark's evaluation of himself. He didn't feel that he was a great person, or even somewhat evil, so he didn't care about any kind of evaluation. He reached out and pointed at Zhu Lark, mockingly asking, "A gentleman on signs regardless of heart, at least I helped them. And Miss Zhu, the kind and great Miss Zhu, what have you done?" Later on, the exasperated Zhu Lark left her 3-day rations behind. And Zhang Yi really gave her face and told the kitchen that she didn't need to prepare food for her for the next 3 days. The Golden Front continued on its way. Zhu Lark sulked at Zhang Yi and locked herself inside the house without coming out. Zhang Yi didn't care about her, she couldn't starve for 3 days without doing anything anyway. On the contrary, Zhou Qi advised Zhang Yi, "She was at least Zhu Zheng's niece, you treat her like this, not afraid of her to Zhu Zheng to report you ah." Zhang Yi said in disbelief, "Zhu Zheng isn't confused enough to fall out with me over this kind of thing. If by now, I still need to look at the faces of those powerful people, wouldn't the end times be in vain?" He smiled and reached out to caress Zhou Qi's white and tender little face. "Don't worry, right now it was the people of Blizzard City who needed me, not me who needed them. Right now, the only reason Zhu Zheng was able to secure his position as the commander of the Jiangnan region was because Zhang Yi decided to step in and save him in the first place. Otherwise, he would have been killed by Gao Changkong long ago." Zhou Qi smiled and said, "I think it's best to talk to Zhu Zheng, there are some things that are best when they can be made clear. Even if he doesn't talk about it now, but in case there's a lump in his heart, it might be trouble in the future." Zhang Yi thought about it and listened to Zhou Qi's words, taking out his communicator to contact Zhu Zheng. Being far away from the ocean, the signal was very poor, but fortunately, they had specially received a set of communication equipment from the headquarters when they set out, and there was a base station on the Golden Front. The base station used was the most advanced Huawei base station in the world, so there was no need to worry about the signal. Zhu Zheng received Zhang Yi's report on his side and said with a smile, "Trouble for you. This niece of mine, her nature is not bad. It's just that she's not deeply involved in the world and doesn't have a deep understanding of the harsh reality. I asked you to set out with you because I intended for you to teach her a good lesson. You don't need to have concerns, just follow your thoughts." With these words from Zhu Zheng, the last trace of concern in Zhang Yi's heart disappeared. He was now acting according to old Zhu's wishes, and at that time, if Zhu Lark played small, his bushel-sized slap would be able to slap her buttocks at any time. If a child didn't listen, it was to be spanked. Chapter 797, Little Pearl Can't Be a Little. Miss Zhu Lark, the great and good person, the benevolent mother of God, and the heart of the world, decided to forgive Zhang Yi's mistake after enduring a whole day's worth of hunger. She hugged her knees and sat on the bed, and after hesitating for a long time, she sent a message to Zhang Yi. "There's no need for us to argue like children, how about making up?" Zhang Yi was eating a delicious beef cheeseburger at the time, and the steaming burger was full of juice when he took a bite. Seeing a message coming over, Zhang Yi picked up his cell phone, merely glanced at it, and threw it back onto the table. After a while, Zhu Lark's message came again. "I'll take it as your agreement if you don't say anything. I'm a bit hungry, can you give me something to eat?" Zhang Yi laughed, almost spitting out the bread in his mouth. He teasingly looked at his phone and sent a voiceover. "The food is for you. Didn't you give it away?" Zhu Lark's eyes widened when she saw Zhang Yi's message, and she huffed as she threw her cell phone onto the bed before covering her stomach and lying on the bed. Zhou Qi said to Zhang Yi, "Really don't feed her, huh? If she starves for 3 days, I'm afraid she was going to break down." Zhang Yi said indifferently, "Those who haven't endured hunger don't have the slightest concept of how precious food is. You can't stand it after only 1 day of starvation? Then what makes her think nothing of the food in my hands?" This was the first lesson for her. Zhou Qi gave a helpless smile. "If you really don't eat anything, you'll get stomach problems. Just let her suffer a little bit, it hasn't been long since we set off, so it's not like we're going to turn against her, right?" Zhang Yi thought about it and thought that Zhou Qi had some truth in what she said. But the necessary punishment was indispensable. He took out a bag of whole wheat bread from the foreign space, and took out a bag of chicken breast cooked in white water. That's right, it was the standard diet package. 2 hours later, you send these things to her. Shokir cried and laughed. It was also something that required a great deal of courage to want to eat these things. Shokir sent these foods to Julark. At first, Julark was quite happy, thinking that Zhang Yi couldn't let her starve after all. But once she saw that what was delivered was actually whole wheat bread and boiled chicken breast, her face turned green. The main focus of the weight loss package was that it was hard to eat. Especially the whole wheat bread, even if it was eaten with water, it pulled on the throat. Zhang Yi let me eat this? Julark asked in disbelief. Shokir smiled. Wasn't this quite good? It's healthy to eat. Seeing Julark's angry and aggrieved face, little pearls were falling from the corners of her eyes. Shokir said, Ms. Zhu, let me say a superfluous word. Zhang Yi's character was such that he would never spoil anyone. So when you get along with him in the future, you'd better not disobey him too much. Julark bit her lip, watering. Then he can't bully me either. Seeing that she was on the verge of tears, Shokir hurriedly consoled, you shouldn't be too upset, after a few days this matter will be over. But don't ever drop your little pearl. When Julark heard this, she immediately raised her head and laughed twice. Don't worry about it, the little pearl can't drop a bit. Shokir secretly laughed in her heart and turned to leave. When she walked away, Julark closed the door, and the little pearls clattered and fell from the corners of her eyes. Hoo-hoo, damn Zhang Yi, how dare he bully me? She looked at the food that Shokir had brought, and with a gamble in her heart, she didn't eat it. 10 minutes later, Julark was cowering at the foot of the bed, drinking mineral water while struggling to eat whole wheat bread and nibbling on a chicken breast. It's so hard to eat, ugh. It was easy to finish the meal, and although the taste of the bread and chicken breast almost made her, a young lady of $1,000, wretch, at least her stomach wasn't that hungry anymore. She stepped out of her room, wanting to go outside to get some air and see the sights of the icy sea. As she passed by the cruise lounge, a sudden smell of oil came to her nose. It was the smell of roasted chicken. Old Tian saw Julark passing by and hurriedly came over to greet her with a smile. Miss Zhu, where are you going? Julark's eyes quietly looked into the room, vaguely seeing food laid out on top of the table. Zhang Yi was never stingy with the people around him, especially when he was on a mission. Letting his subordinates eat well made them work with vigor. You guys are eating good food. Julark pretended to say carelessly, lightly turning his head to the side for fear of old Tian seeing his gluttony. Old Tian laughed. That's not true, Mr. Zhang is too good to us. When we were in Tianhai City, we could not even eat this food once a month. Now that it was big fish and meat every day, it smells too good. Speaking of this, he suddenly remembered that Julark had nothing to eat in the past few days. He couldn't help but say, Miss Zhu, haven't eaten anything yet, right? If you don't mind, come over and eat some with us? Julark almost nodded in agreement. However, she couldn't do so because if she did, Zhang Yi would definitely make fun of her for the rest of her life for this matter. I don't need to. Zhang Yi has sent me food, you don't think he really dares to starve me, do you? Julark said with a stiff upper lip. Old Tian nodded, that's right. You are after all someone sent by the region. Can Mr. Zhang still treat you poorly? Julark couldn't help but ask, what was all you guys eating today? Old Tian laughed, oh, it was just some roasted chicken, grilled meat, grilled fish and mashed potatoes. Julark's heart clamored for tears, damn Zhang Yi, giving them food that was better than what he gave her. Oh, what I ate was also these things. Julark's mouth stiffened as she parted her head and hurriedly left the place. The Golden Front continued to travel on the sea, and without realizing it, 26 days had passed. According to the original plan, 28 days of sailing would be enough to reach the destination, Rockflow Island. But after actually going out to sea, it was realized that the situation was much worse than imagined. First was the fact that along the way, in order to bypass the dangerous areas of the deep sea, one would have to make a detour. And in the middle of the way, one would also encounter forces from other regions. Pirates and even the navies of some kingdoms would come into contact. This, coupled with the fact that there would be blizzards on the sea from time to time, further hindered the speed of travel. For the first time in his life, Zhang Yi had gone on a long voyage on the sea. On a few stormy nights, the winds were so fierce that the storm outside hissed like a monster, blowing this icebreaker up and down. That kind of feeling really shook one's soul. Zhou Qi cowering in his arms, hugging his body tightly and not daring to let go. Zhang Yi exclaimed the power of nature in his heart as he stroked her smooth back and comforted her. "It's fine, there won't be any danger. With me here, everything is fine." Zhang Yi's heart was also a bit jittery, but that was just an instinctive reaction to going out to sea for the first time. In fact, even if they were in danger, with his ability, he was able to survive with Zhou Qi and the others. After the blizzard, they marched on as usual. And a few days later, they encountered uninvited guests again. Chapter 798, Malay Navy. On the morning of this day, the sun shone through the clouds on the sea. The white daylight looked cold and did not bring much temperature. Even though it was in the middle of July, and they had already arrived in the tropical region of the sea, the temperature was still low, at more than 20 degrees below zero. But this kind of temperature was already heavenly compared to the north. At the very least, the survival rate of human beings in this kind of environment was greatly increased. After a night of blizzard, Zhang Yi and the others couldn't help but come to the deck, looking at the icy sea that tends to calm down. Their hearts were full of emotions. However, just at this moment, a beeping sound came to their ears. At the end of the endless sea level, a black dot was slowly approaching. Old Tian hurried over and said to Zhang Yi, "A warship is coming." It was the Malay Kingdom's navy. Zhang Yi asked curiously, "Isn't this the open sea?" Old Tian smiled bitterly. "You should also know that the sea is now similar to the land. Many of the previous rules are now gone. Due to the shortage of supplies, many small countries have turned into bandit countries. The navies of some kingdoms also moonlight as pirates. Other than world powers like our Huashu Kingdom or Colombia, there are quite a few other kingdoms like this." Zhang Yi slowly narrowed his eyes. The Malay Kingdom was also a very large kingdom in the oceanic region. Before the other party expressed their hostility, Zhang Yi could not directly strike. "What are they going to do?" Zhang Yi asked. Old Tian said, "They offered to board the ship for inspection." "Mr. Zhang, what do we do?" Old Tian's heart was also straightening up. The Malay Kingdom's warships were no joke, carrying advanced weapons on them. Even if the Golden Front had thick armor, it could not stop the warship's artillery and torpedoes. Zhang Yi narrowed his eyes and thought about countermeasures. Zhu Lark said, "We can communicate with them. If they know that we are a ship of Huashu Kingdom, they would not dare to make things difficult." Zhang Yi glanced at her. "If we bring up the name of Jiangnan region and say that we were expatriates affiliated with Blizzard City, they might be wary." "But are you sure you want to expose our identity?" Zhu Lark didn't know what to say at that moment. What they were carrying out was a secret mission. They absolutely couldn't expose their identities. Even if it was a civilian ship, then maybe. Zhu Lark's voice was getting smaller and smaller. She had seen a lot of fighting and killing along the way, and her mindset was slowly changing. In the end of the world, human life is cheaper than grass. If they really were a civilian ship, no one would care even if something happened. Old Tian asked, "So what was your point?" Zhang Yi faintly got up from the railing. "Let them come over, then see what happens." It all depended on what the other party actually planned to do. Zhang Yi did not stir up trouble, nor was he afraid of it. Strength was his greatest capital. Old Tian's side got Zhang Yi's order and immediately asked the staff to respond to the other party's information about boarding and inspection. Zhou Qi was next to Zhang Yi. Her small hand was held by his big hand, and the nervousness in her heart immediately disappeared. She looked up at his bland-side face, and a down-to-earth smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Zhu Lark's heart was actually nervous. This situation was the first time in her life that she had seen it. If she couldn't reveal her identity, then she was just a civilian. It was impossible to say that she was not nervous when she had to face the inspection of another country's navy on the sea for the first time as a civilian. She originally also wanted to get close to Zhang Yi to gain a sense of security. But the way Zhang Yi and Zhou Qi looked made her feel especially redundant. Not long after, a gray warship arrived next to the Gold Ent front. The warship wasn't big, a bit larger than the Gold Ent front, and it was filled with soldiers wrapped tightly in white combat uniforms and holding weapons in their hands. Zhang Yi's eyes did not leave them, and once they made any unusual moves, Zhang Yi would unfold the dimensional gate at the first opportunity to fend off the other party's attack. On the Malay Kingdom's warship, an officer-looking man stood out. The combat uniform he was wearing was obviously different from that of an ordinary soldier, and it was easy to distinguish between them. He waved this way, and then the two ships slowly drew together. The soldiers built wooden planks, then fishtailed along them to the deck of the Gold Ent front. Zhu Lark explained to them, "We're from Huashu Kingdom, this is just an ordinary civilian ship, and we're definitely not carrying any prohibited items." The Malay Kingdom's navy ignored her words. Instead, one of the soldiers directly walked over and pushed Zhu Lark to the ground, the barrel of the gun in his hand directly aimed at her head. "I told you to talk and you were talking, now, be quiet and shut your mouth to me." The black hole of the gun pointed at Zhu Lark's head. She could even see the cold spiral inside. In this life, she had never had a gun pointed at her head. This great lady was instantly stunned, sitting dumbfounded on the ground and not daring to move. Zhang Yi silently watched this scene but had no intention of making a move, only his eyes observed the soldier's finger. His gun was just to scare Zhu Lark, his finger was not placed on the trigger. "Now, all of you stand honestly with your hands behind your back and then accept our inspection." The soldier shook the gun in his hand and yelled. The other soldiers had already rushed into the cabin and started searching. Zhang Yi did not move. There weren't many supplies on the ship. Zhang Yi had expected this to happen, so the ship's cabin was usually only stocked with a small amount of supplies, enough for just a week. Zhu Lark was so frightened that her face turned white. She turned her gaze for help to Zhang Yi, but she saw that Zhang Yi's face was calm. Obviously Zhang Yi did not wish to expose his identity. Small pearls barred down from the corners of Zhu Lark's eyes. Zhang Yi didn't care about her at all. She could only stand up honestly as well, then obediently stood next to Zhou Qi. A soldier held a gun and demanded that they hand over the weapons they were carrying. Zhang Yi secretly gave them a wink, and all of them placed the guns on their bodies on the floor. Because of their cooperation, the Malay Kingdom's navy did not do anything more rude. The officer-looking man swept his gaze at Zhang Yi and the others and asked, "Which one of you was the captain?" Zhang Yi replied, "Sir, I was the captain of this ship." This officer from the Malay Kingdom, named Obengus, stared at Zhang Yi's face and asked coldly, "People from Huashu Kingdom, why did you come to the middle of the ocean thousands of kilometers away? Say, what is your purpose?" Zhang Yi swallowed his saliva, stuttering a bit in his fearful speech. "I received a distress signal from my sister. She's trapped on an island. I was here to rescue her." "Rescue? What a touching brother," Obengus said with a cold smile, obviously not fully believing Zhang Yi's words. Inside the cabin, the rattling sound was constant, and these soldiers were extraordinarily rude when they searched for things. Nothing was willing to be spared. Zhang Yi couldn't help but say, "Sir, we don't have much supplies on board anymore. Can you leave us some food?" Chapter 799, One or the Other. Obengus did not pay the slightest attention to Zhang Yi's words. In a short while, those soldiers carried out a lot of things from inside the cabin. Various kinds of canned food, as well as firearms and weapons, there was a huge pile of them. Obengus saw this and said to his adjutant, "Did you not find anything else suspicious?" The adjutant replied, "Checked, it was just an ordinary civilian ship. There is nothing suspicious." Obengus nodded, "Take them and let's go back." These words were said in front of everyone, and Zhang Yi heard them clearly. His eyes slowly narrowed. "Sir, we still have business." "Shut the hell up." A soldier directly pointed his gun at Zhang Yi's head. "Right now, you have no qualifications to speak. This ship of yours has been requisitioned by the Malay Navy, as well as you, who are now given an incomparably honorable opportunity to serve the Malay Navy, thank God." Zhang Yi let out a long sigh. Old Tian and the others looked at the soldiers in front of them and felt sorry for them. Isn't it good to live? Having to find death? In my entire life, I hate it when people hold a gun to my head. Space acceleration, 30 times. Zhang Yi's figure suddenly disappeared in front of Malay Navy. A black light flashed in the air like a long black snake that appeared horizontally. After a split second, a dozen or so navies were directly chopped into two with their guns. Obanga's body was covered in sweat as he realized the crisis of death was approaching. He raised his arms and transformed them into a huge crystal shield in front of him. However, all the desperate struggles were futile. Just one sword, there was no difference between him and an ordinary soldier. He was killed in seconds. 2 seconds. The Malay Navy on the deck of the Golden Front were all killed. The Malay Navy on the warship realized that something was wrong and rushed to shoot. And Zhang Yi had already leapt onto the deck of the warship. How terrifying was a top Delta-class Inhuman's full-strength strike? To ordinary people and low-level Inhumans, he was a god. Zhang Yi did not have the slightest reservation and used his full strength to kill the Malay Navy in front of him. This operation had to be kept a secret. A second late and the other party might send information about them to the Malay Navy headquarters. By then, their plan of action would be completely exposed. Zhang Yi could not afford to take this risk. So in the beginning, he was planning to send out some supplies to put things to rest. It was just a pity that this group of Malay Navy was too greedy, so they would have to die. After Zhang Yi killed the soldiers on the deck in seconds, he directly swept out with a backhanded sword. Wow! The bulletproof glass and thick armor of the command room were like papier-mâché and were directly chopped to pieces. Along with being destroyed were the soldiers inside. Their bodies were split in half along with the command room. Quickly, take control of their command console. Zhang Yi yelled at Old Tian and the others. He then backhanded the hilt of Holy Judgment and plunged the sword into the underside of the deck. The dark matter rushed like flames, directly destroying the power units below the deck before turning into a torrent towards every room. Those Malay soldiers were engulfed by the dark matter. No matter what kind of substance the combat uniforms they wore were made of, all of them were drowned at the first moment and then disintegrated into particle form. Zhang Yi jumped down from his sword and harvested the survivors. Old Tian was also in a hurry to lead his men to jump onto the warship and start controlling the command console. The counterkill was completed in an instant, and the time from Zhang Yi's strike to Old Tian and the others boarding the ship was less than half a minute. A few dozen seconds later, Zhang Yi had killed everyone on the warship. The kill was carried out extremely fast. Zhang Yi gasped for breath and was surprisingly a little excited in his heart. It was not because of fear, but the fear that the kill was not done fast enough and the information here was sent out. In that case, their mission might be exposed. He carried his sword back to the deck. The command room had already had its roof cut off, revealing all the electronic equipment in the cold wind. How is it? Did they send out any intelligence about us? Zhang Yi inquired. There was naturally an engineer amongst the sailors, and after checking, he said, "Mr. Zhang, they didn't have time to send it. However, this ship is now heavily damaged, and it won't take too long for the Malay Navy to realize the problem. Can you delay it for a bit? The longer the better." The sailor said, 2 hours at the most, and they'll realize something's wrong. And with their technical skills, they will surely be able to find our position. By then, we might be surrounded by the Malay Navy and it will be troublesome. Zhang Yi bit his fingertips, then immediately returned to the Golden Front and utilized his communicator to contact Yang Xinxin, who was far away in Tianhai City. "Brother, Xian misses you so much." Yang Xinxin's cute face appeared on the screen. Zhang Yi smiled. Although he was at sea, he would video chat with his family every few days. "Xinxin, I'm encountering a very troublesome problem right now. Can you help me with an idea?" Zhang Yi explained the situation to Yang Xinxin. Yang Xinxin sniffed and said while eating a lollipop, "This is a good problem to solve. their communication device is in your hands, that's fine. Brother, connect the device to Xion's computer and I can help you forge their information to communicate with the Malay Navy. This way, if they want to realize that something is wrong, it will be at least 30 hours later. Yang Xinshin sat in the control room of the shelter, and in front of her was dozens of huge screens. Her small white hands tapped rapidly on the keyboard. The Malay Kingdom can only be considered a small country at the midstream level. Their management system must be rather chaotic right now. I'll find an excuse to try and hide it. Thinking of their attempt to snatch the gold ent front, Zhang Yi said, let's just say that they came across a neon ship and planned to grab the supplies on it. It would be even better if they could cause trouble. Alright, then let's follow your script, brother. Zhang Yi made a direct move and plugged a signal receiver into the warship's console, and Yang Xinshin quickly hacked into its system. A message was then sent to the Malay military, indicating that the ship they encountered was not from Huashu Kingdom, but belonged to a group of Neon Ronin. Now they were in pursuit. It was the end of the world, and a great deal of intelligence could not be judged, so this statement would not be easily exposed. After that, Yang Xinshin would regularly keep in contact with Mallet to stall for time. And after this period of time, Zhang Yi and the others had long since taken a boat away from the area around Malai Sea. Even if the other party wanted to find someone, they would give up due to the lack of intelligence and the high cost of ocean sailing. Yang Xinshin controlled that warship and sent the wrong signal to the Malay military. Zhang Yi and the others, on the other hand, was returning to the gold ent front. Old Tian, full speed ahead and leave this sea as soon as possible. Zhang Yi ordered. Was, Mr. Zhang. Old Tian didn't dare to be slow, and hurriedly had the men move forward at full speed. The faces of the crew were written with excitement though. Seeing that their leader was so mighty that even the navy of a country was casually abused by him, they couldn't help but feel a surge of pride rise in their hearts. The crowd worked with more vigor and returned to their posts to work. It was only at this time that Zhang Yi noticed Zhou Qiu treating Zhu Lark. The soldier had just pushed her and injured her elbow. During the cold season, people's bodies were more fragile and prone to injuries. Plus, Zhu Lark herself was a delicate young lady, so it wasn't surprising. Alright. Zhou Qiu healed her injuries by simply utilizing her ability. But the pain wouldn't go away that quickly. Zhu Lark's eyes were red with aggrievement as she looked at Zhang Yi with a sultry look. When they bullied me, why didn't you step in? She was unbalanced in her heart. If Zhang Yi had stepped in earlier to save her, she would have been fine. Since when could she even bully a junior soldier? If you had said less at that time, wouldn't it have been fine? Zhang Yi just lightly returned a sentence. Chapter 800, Chicken and Duck Talk. Zhang Yi's attitude made Zhu Lark sad. That Malay soldier was holding a gun to her head just now. It was so close that she would have been killed. You don't care about me at all. She shouted angrily at Zhang Yi. From the very first time we met, you've been treating me poorly. Tell me, what exactly was it that I did to piss you off? I've been trying very hard to get on good terms with you. What else do you want from me? Zhang Yi fell silent. Why did it sound like it was his fault instead? Wasn't Zhu Lark herself the one who had been treating him with arrogance from start to finish? What's more, they were just working partners, and Zhang Yi had no obligation whatsoever to curry favor with her. What I promised Commander Zhu was only to guarantee your life. But this mission is important, and I don't like having a liability around me. But if you can understand a little bit, I won't treat you with this kind of attitude. Zhang Yi wrinkled his eyebrows and looked at her as if he was looking at a child. Put away your big lady temper, those things you're so proud of are useless in this world right now. Zhu Lark was hit hard, yet she was unwilling to admit this. How could she have done something wrong? The one who was wrong was clearly this man in front of her who didn't know how to be compassionate, cold and impersonal. Nonsense, you were just keeping it in your mind because I said you don't take off your gloves when shaking hands. You were waiting for an opportunity to get back at me. She shouted very loudly. Zhang Yi said without hesitation, crap, I didn't expect this to be discovered by you. You're so smart, and it was because of that incident that I never forgave you. Zhu Lark froze for a moment. She was just venting her emotions, and Zhang Yi really admitted it. Zhang Yi smirked and pointed at his nose. You should get to know more about it. I, Zhang Yi, am a person who is notoriously careful and vindictive. Didn't expect that, did you? He slowly opened his eyes, a cold light of impatience flashing by. So from now on, don't ever bother me again. He glanced absently at the huge sea of ice. In a place like this, any accident was possible. He had just finished killing someone, and the blood aura on his body was very strong, still hadn't dissipated. This murderous aura immediately caused Zhu Lark's neck to begin to chill. Her face turned pale and she staggered back a few steps before running back into the cabin in a panic. With the annoying guy finally gone, Zhang Yi let out a breath. The world is quiet now. Zhou Keir saw this but said with some worry, she was Zhu Zheng's niece after all. It's not good to speak to her like that, right? It's nothing bad. Zhang Yi leaned against the railing as the gold-ent front moved forward at full speed, the cold wind blowing across his body. Sorry to say, it didn't feel any coolness because he was wearing the most advanced cold-proof suit. I wasn't a highly emotional person in the first place, and the matter of being exquisite on all sides and being able to get things done left and right has nothing to do with me. Zhang Yi laughed playfully. Zhou Keir looked at his expression and for no reason recalled half a year ago, when she had just met Zhang Yi. The end of the world had arrived, and at that time, he had given no one any favors and lived an incomparably unrestrained life. And now, Zhang Yi was still the same Zhang Yi. She smiled gently. There are times when I often think that it would be nice if I could be as dashing as you. This one is simple. As long as you don't have morals, you won't be morally kidnapped. Live without a heart, and all of life will be easy. After Zhu Lark went back, the first thing that came to her mind was to find Zhu Zheng to complain. Like a little girl who had been bullied in school, or maybe she hadn't been bullied, but just felt aggrieved herself, she made a report to the counselor. Usually, this was a shortcut to graduate school, and Zhu Lark knew this well. The communicator connected to Zhu Zheng's office. Zhu Zheng's majestic face appeared behind the desk. Lark, what happened? Zhu Lark sniffled. Uncle, I almost died just now. She was full of grievances as she told Zhu Zheng what she had just experienced. Originally, she thought that Zhu Zheng would teach Zhang Yi a lesson after hearing this. But after Zhu Zheng heard it, he just laughed and said, Don't worry about it, it was all a minor issue. A mere Malay kingdom need not put them in their eyes. My Huashu kingdom's ships can sail wherever they want. He thought Zhu Lark was crying because she was being bullied by Malay soldiers. Zhu Lark said in dissatisfaction, Eldest uncle, although the Malay soldiers were hateful, Zhang Yi, he treated me poorly as well. I was pushed down by others and he even pointed a gun at me, yet Zhang Yi didn't help me out. Zhu Zheng was surprised and asked back, Didn't Zhang Yi take out all the Malay soldiers? Isn't that still not standing up for you? Zhu Lark was momentarily speechless. This is true, but he was quite indifferent at the time. Zhu Zheng said with a smirk, Zhang Yi, this person, has a cold face and a warm heart. It may look like he doesn't care about anything, but the lad is actually very passionate. He's like a pile of dry firewood. You need to light him with your own flame first before you can heat up. Dry wood and fire, you get it, right? Lark, Zhang Yi is very important to me and the entire Jiangnan region. You can make sure to get on good terms with him and take him down. Zhu Lark was speechless throughout a large part of her. She even felt that Zhang Yi's position in Zhu Zheng's heart was more important than her. Zhu Lark couldn't say anything else with a belly full of complaints. She wasn't stupid and knew that continuing to spit on Zhang Yi would only make Zhu Zheng unhappy. However, after ending the call, she couldn't help but start getting annoyed in her heart. Zhang Yi, you really have no eyes. A woman like this young lady who wants to look good and has substance, why are you so thin-skinned? Zhu Lark spat in exasperation. She also wanted to get closer to Zhang Yi. However, Zhang Yi had Zhou Keir with him on the road, and the two of them were together wherever they went, not giving her a chance to see the light. But with Zhou Qi around, her charm would immediately be greatly reduced. The Golden Front continued to travel in a southeastern direction. During dinner, Zhu Lark took the initiative to find Zhang Yi. This time, her attitude became much better. I've already talked to Big Uncle about the Malay Kingdom's navy, and Big Uncle told you not to worry, just continue with your mission. Any problems the region will take care of them properly for you. Zhang Yi looked at her gentle demeanor and couldn't help but kindly laugh. I thought you would only look for your elder uncle to sue me. Zhu Lark was instantly anxious. How can you flat out defile someone's innocence? Zhang Yi raised an eyebrow. In other words, I guessed right? The truth was the sharpest sword. Zhu Lark took a deep breath. All right, I admit that I was a bit prejudiced against you in the past. I'll try to listen to you more in the future, okay? I also hope that you can treat me better. Realize that I am not an unreasonable woman. And I can be of great help to you in the future. She was hinting to Zhang Yi that if he stayed with her, he would have a chance to get more power and elevate his status in the Jiangnan region in the future. Zhang Yi's eating movements paused slightly, then he did not comment on Zhu Lark's words. Chicken and duck talk.